chances are when we don't take action, it's because of fear. Fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of judgment by others, fear that you might be called shameless or bossy or manipulative or reckless. But when fear is at the root, fear can also be the solution because you can push past that fear. And when you do, no matter you succeed or fail in any one given thing, you realize the joy and the wonderment and the fulfillment that lies on the other side, because that's where the real magic lies. And everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So when you push past it, real learning and growth and happiness are right there waiting for you.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Leadership Podcast. You've no doubt heard many of the popular self-actualization quotes, such as, "If your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough," or "Replace fear of the unknown with curiosity," or "It's not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it's because we do not dare that things are difficult," or "A ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for." An unspoken theme in all of those sentiments is courage. If you're interested in stretching your wings and flying to new heights, Jenny Wood offers a masterclass in her book, Wild Courage: Go After What You Want and Get It. Jenny is a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, former Google executive, and former Harvard Business School researcher who says real success isn't about following the rules or waiting your turn. This conversation promises to be interesting. Jenny Wood, welcome to Leadership.
Thanks so much for having me. Joy to be here.
This is going to be fun. Jenny, how do you define wildness, and why do you think it's important for personal growth?
Well, my moment of wildness happened in 2011 when I'm riding the subway home from work one day and a really attractive guy is standing about 20 feet away from me. And I wanted to stay safe. I wanted to stay small. I wanted to be that ship that stayed in the harbor. So I did not go up and talk to him. You know, what if he's married? What if he's a convicted felon? What if 100 people stare at me on this packed train? Right? Fear leading me. And so I sat there, I did nothing as the train passed stop after stop after stop, and his life passed me by. But still so taken by him, I made a deal with the universe. And I said, if he gets off at my stop, then I'll try to strike up a conversation with him. And if not, then say la vie. But he gets off at the next stop. And then all of a sudden, I feel this wave of wildness wash over me, this wave of wild courage. And just as the doors are about to close, I run off the train, prying them open. I chase after him and I tap him on the shoulder as he's exiting the station. I say, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you. You're wearing gloves, so I can't tell if you're wearing a wedding ring. But in the event that you're not married, you were on my subway and I thought you were cute. Any chance I could give you my business card?" And then I wait for what feels like forever, thinking this was a terrible idea. But eventually he takes the card. He calls the next day. We go on a date a week later. 3 years later, we're getting married, and we've now been married 11 years with 2 small kids, 8 and 10 years old. So that is what wildness means to me.
Yeah, that is wild. That is wild. It makes my meeting my wife seem pretty tame compared to that. But
well, it's untraditional what I did, right? I didn't wait to be asked. I didn't, fall into the societal norms of the man pursues and the woman sits quietly.
Right,
and then I started applying this wildness, this wild courage to all areas of life. I started asking for what I wanted at Google and started getting promoted, ultimately being the COO of multiple divisions at Google. I started this program called Own Your Career, which ended up helping 56,000 Googlers across 100 countries. So, you can apply this wildness to all areas of life.
So what's going on in our society these days that makes the need for courage such a hot topic?
Well, think of all the things that we don't have control over, right? The onset of AI, global wars happening, right? Economic uncertainty, changes in administration, political questions, right? And so when all of that is outside of the locus of our control, wild courage is what helps us really tap into our internal locus of control and push past the fear that might be out there around any given thing in the world. There's always a piece that you can control. And usually the fears we're pushing past are fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, and fear of judgment by others. Honestly, it's the three fears I felt on the subway that day. Fear of failure. What if he's married? Fear of uncertainty. What if he's a convicted felon? Fear of judgment by others. What if 100 people stare at me on this packed train? But if I had let those fears hold me back, I would have stayed small. I wouldn't have this incredible life I have with this wonderful husband and family. And so when you think about what's going on in the outside world, wild courage is always the antidote, and it's always where you have control.
I think it would be interesting to know what your future husband was thinking as he was standing there looking at that business card that you were handing him just for a few seconds. I wonder what he was thinking at that point.
Well, I was actually holding flowers, yellow Gerber daisies, that I had taken from this a cappella rehearsal I had just had at Google. So first he was thinking, is she trying to sell me flowers? But then I intentionally gave him the Google business card because I was trying to pre-validate who I was and say, like, I'm already a legit person. Google does background checks. I'm not a total random person. I'm worth talking to. I'm worth going on a date with.
And lived happily ever after.
Here we are.
So do you think everyone has wild courage within them, or are some people naturally more inclined to be courageous?
I think yes and yes. Some people are more naturally inclined, but anybody can learn this. You might not be a subway chaser, and that's totally fine. But wherever you sit right now, there is something that you want. And wild courage is simply what closes the gap between what you want and what you get. And even if you're born an extrovert, an introvert, born in Tokyo, Sao Paulo, New York, LA, no matter what level of wild courage you come out of the womb with, there's always a little bit more you can do to dial it up. So anybody with the right growth mindset can live more of a life of wild courage, no matter what it is and how much you dial that up. And for some people, they don't have to dial it up much because they were born naturally courageous. And other people might have to work a little bit harder to dial it up. But absolutely anybody can learn this.
One of the many things I love about your book is that you flip the script on traits that people often see as negative. I'd like to go through each of those and hear what you have to say about them.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to list them first. The traits are weird, selfish, shameless, obsessed, nosy, manipulative, brutal, reckless, and bossy. Now, those sound pretty negative.
They sound pretty bad.
Yeah, but you flipped the script. So let's start with the first one. How did you choose those particular traits to write about first?
So I actually was given a homework assignment by one of my editors. On the flight home from New York, I was meeting my editor, my agent, all the three of us for the first time live in New York, after doing a bunch of Zoom calls. And David, one of my editors, said, Jenny, I have a homework assignment for you on your flight back to Boulder, Colorado, where I live. I want you to think of everything that's helped you be successful. Write down a bunch of things that have helped you be successful that people might think have a bit of an ick factor. So for example, like maybe I would walk by my boss's office a couple times in the afternoon to catch her when she was not on the phone, and I could just pop my head in and ask my question or share something I was working on. Well, that became obsessed, or that also falls into manipulative, the courage to be intentional about the relationships you build and to understand that it's okay to influence. It's okay to be strategic about how you build relationships and where you invest your time, your energy, where you show up. And so that was the impetus for it all.
So you created a list and eventually it became a book.
That's right.
So let's start with weird. Why is embracing your weirdness a competitive advantage?
Well, weird is the courage to stand out, right? It's about how, if you worry about what people think about of you or what makes you different, you're going to sink without a trace. I mean, that worked on the savannah, right? When we didn't want to be weird, we didn't want to stick our neck out because that might mean that we're a lion's lunch. But there are no saber-toothed tigers coming, round the corner now to attack us. We live in an interconnected world of 8 billion people, and if you want to stand out in your role, if you want to stand out in your career, in life, on a date, being weird or just being proud of who you are, authentically, being proud of what you bring to the table is the only way that you're going to be successful. Not the only way. It's one of the ways you can accelerate your success. And that could mean diplomatically disagreeing with your boss when everybody else is nodding along like a bobblehead in your meeting of 10 people. Let's say you're the intern or you're an early career professional. You might set up time with the boss's boss and say, hey, I know this is the way you've done it for the last 5 years, but with fresh eyes and fresh perspective, excuse me for getting a little weird here, but what if you did it this way? Like your senior leader is actually going to appreciate you as a 24-year-old coming with a fresh perspective. It feels a little weird to go against the grain, but it's what helps you get recognized. It's what helps you stand out. It's what helps you get promoted and make more money.
So you own it.
You own it. Yeah.
So you reclaim selfish as a strength. How can people be selfish without seeming self-centered?
What's the courage to stand up for what you want, because give everybody else a leg up at your own expense and you will end up getting trampled. So start showing up for yourself. I was teaching a bunch of executives in a small group coaching session this morning, and someone said, but if I talk about my wins, doesn't that diminish somebody else's? And I said, no, this is not about redividing the pie. It's about expanding the pie. And when you share something that you're working on, then other people get ideas. If you say that, you've been putting the work in, you feel like you're performing at the next level, you want to ask for the promotion. It doesn't mean that somebody else can't also get it. Companies promote more than one person a year, right? It just means that if you're not advocating for yourself, and you're not being a bit of a squeaky wheel, your manager or your customer, if you're trying to upsell them, or your partner, might not understand the value that you bring to the table. So start asking for what you want and showing up for yourself.
Yeah, or you'll be overlooked.
Right.
Now, shameless is a big one. What's your advice for someone who's terrified of self-promotion?
Well, this one speaks really near and dear to my heart. Someone emailed me yesterday, a young professional named Andrea in Singapore, and she said, and clearly a top performer. I could tell by the way she wrote, I could tell by the impact she'd already had in her company that she was someone who had a lot of talent. And she said, I've been struggling, being passed over. I've been quietly disengaged. It broke my heart to see someone who was clearly talented share that she'd been quietly disengaged. But then she heard me on a podcast. She picked up the book and she said, it was the shameless trait that really spoke to me, because I now realize I have to play the game a little bit. It's not just about my work speaking for itself. I recognize now that 50% of my job is communicating up, down, and across. And I need to not show up in a meeting and sit there quietly nodding along. I need to talk about my wins. I need to send an email every Monday to my manager, which is what I call the Shameless Monday email, where you spend no more than 15 minutes, but you write 4 bullets, 2 things you're proud of from last week and 2 things that you're excited to work on this week. When I was a leader at Google, 90% of people on my team, and these were senior leaders reporting to me, 90% of people did not do this. But the 10% that did shamelessly talk about their wins each week were the ones who had my attention, the ones where I could CC my boss on that email, and the ones who ultimately rose in their careers more quickly and more successfully.
So how do you define healthy obsession? And where's the line between passion and burnout?
Well, I'll address that piece first. Each of these 9 traits has what I call a trait trap. When you take the trait too far, obsession is the courage to push, perform, persist. It's about putting your deepest energy and enthusiasm into a project. By the way, not for some company, but to achieve your own ambitions. But there is a situation where you take it too far. And actually, if you ask me what I struggle with the most of these, it's obsessed, because I can be at risk of burnout. I struggle with what I call lowercase a anxiety. And I certainly feel like when I get excited about something, I want to go full tilt. Even when I was promoting this book, I worried that that my kids wanted to divorce me and that they were never going to forgive me for how much I was on a plane in the spirit of promoting this. I flew to Hong Kong, a 17-hour flight, to be there for one night to do a 2-hour podcast recording with someone who has a 10 million person audience on YouTube, and flew back 17 hours. I don't even think I was there 24 hours. That's obsessed, but I felt like it was healthy. I knew what I was doing. But taking it too far is when you grind yourself into a workaholic pulp. And I definitely feel like I've had moments of that where I was trying to maximize too much, be an 11 out of 10 on everything, and not satisfice enough, a 3 out of 10 on some things. This is actually research by a professor at Swarthmore University, a psychologist named Barry Schwartz. And he warns that there are maximizers and satisficers in life. And while maximizers might be obsessed and get slightly better results, they tend to be less happy. Satisficers maybe don't get quite as good of results, but they're happier during the process. So that's kind of the trait trap there. That's how you avoid burnout. That's where you know that you're taking it too far. Be mindful of when you can be a maximizer and when it's perfectly sufficient to be a satisficer. And that's work that I still need to do in life.
Well, Jenny, it sounds like you have a pretty good sense of self-awareness. So hang in there.
Thank you. I'm a work in progress.
Yeah, aren't we
you
all?
And everyone.
Yeah. So nosy is a fun one. How can curiosity be a superpower in networking and leadership?
Yeah. Well, this is the one that makes you more comfortable in a networking event or in a one-on-one with your boss's boss. Or, I just gave someone advice, a one-on-one coaching client this morning who said, I want to set up time. I want to go to my VP's office hours at my company, but if I'm not asking them for something, like what do I use that time for? I don't want to waste their time. And nosiness is the courage to get insatiably curious. It's that curiosity drowns out fear and pulls you closer to what matters most to you. So use it as your compass. So if you're meeting with someone who intimidates you, nosiness is your answer. What and how questions. I call these door openers, not door stops. A yes or no question. Roger, do you like being a podcast host, right? That's a yes or no question. It stops you right there. It doesn't really increase the depth of the conversation. But if I were to say a what or how question, a door opener, I might say, what is your favorite thing about podcasting? Or how has the podcasting industry changed over the last 5 years? Ooh, now we're getting really rich. And if I'm, setting up time with you as a mentee who's thinking about starting a podcast, I'm not, but let's say I am, then if I'm nervous in that meeting with you, putting the spotlight on you, asking you questions, those door opener, what and how questions, takes a lot of the pressure off of me. If I have to look smart, I have to look sharp, I have to look buttoned up, I have to make it seem like, it's worth your while. There's a pleasure center in our brain that's highlighted when we talk about ourselves. So when you get nosy with someone in a position of power, you're actually putting them in a good mood. They're more likely to say yes to you. They're more likely to want to help you. And that's all a result of being nosy.
Makes a world of sense. And my answer to that question is, I like to talk to smart people like you.
Well,
that's why I'm doing this.
I appreciate that.
So manipulative is provocative, to say the least. How do you reframe that word in a positive light?
Well, this is definitely the most harrowing of all the words, right? This is the one where when it was actually my editor that proposed this structure to me, and I was like, no way, no how. I am not going to put a book into the world where I tell people to be selfish and shameless and reckless and manipulative. For sure was the one that I was like, absolutely not, full stop. And then I started liking it. So now I love teaching people to be manipulative because it's simply the courage to tap into your influence skills, to build lasting relationships through empathy. Because no matter whether you're selling an idea, a product, or frankly yourself, your ability to win friends and allies is all about mutual benefit. So figure out what people want and go get it for them, and you'll both be better off. So, for example, if you're in a job where you're thinking about getting promoted, managing up is old news. Everyone knows you have to have a good relationship with your boss. What I encourage people to do is to manage higher, manage diagonally. Higher is your boss's boss. Diagonally is your, the peers to the right and left of your boss. Like on an org chart, you've got your boss above you and their peers to the right and left. Well, go figure out what makes these people tick. Pick 2 or 3 out of the 7 of your boss's peers, not the day before promotions are decided, but 12 months before promotions are decided, and build genuine relationships. Who do you pick of those 2 or 3? How do you get manipulative in the right way? pick the intersection of people who are smart and are there and for a good reason and have the big boss's ear. Don't pick the bozos, right? Some people got there by luck. Don't pick them. And then use that with the intersection of who you genuinely like and get along with so that you can enjoy the time with them. But manipulative is all about creating something out of nothing. Think of an artist who takes a lump of, wet clay and manipulates it into something creative and beautiful and this gorgeous sculpture. So you can manipulate relationships so that people want to partner with you. You're bringing positive energy. You're bringing new ideas. You're creating something that wasn't there before. That's what you're manipulating.
I think one of the wonderful things about your book is that you're using some of these previously negative terms, and you really dig down into them, and you open our eyes to the world of possibility, and you give those words new meaning, and it forces the reader to think through what the possibilities are. And you're doing that in our talk right now.
Yeah. And to push past the fear, because again, of those three fears, fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of judgment by others, if I were to say to 100 people right now, which of those fears is the strongest for you? Chances are they would not say fear of judgment by others, but that's oftentimes what's at the root of all of this. Like, for example, in order to promote this book, because this is so much what I've done, like the book came out 3 months ago, this is heavily on my mind. I reached out to probably 200 authors, influencers, to ask them to get nosy and obsessed and say, would you be open to promoting this book in your newsletter when it comes out? Not comfortable. Definitely a fear of failure. Like, what if they say no to me? Definitely a fear of uncertainty. I don't know how they're going to react. Are they going to, think that I shouldn't be asking them? But at the root of all that is the fear of judgment. And there was a lot of people said yes. Some people ghosted me. Some people said no politely. But one person, one name, one author that everybody would know this person's name. I won't say it for their privacy. But this person not only said no, but they also cut off the friendship with me and the mentorship relationship we'd had. And man, did it sting. This was a few days before the book came out. I lost sleep over it. Man, did it sting. And it wasn't that they said no to me, is that it was that third fear of judgment. Do they think I'm foolish? Do they think I'm ungrateful? Do they think I'm greedy? Do they regret the time they've spent mentoring me the last several years? And so it often is the sneaky one, the fear of judgment by others. And it's a fear of being called obsessed, manipulative, bossy, reckless, that limits our potential because it stops us from taking action. But again, it goes back to our locus of control. You can always take action, and action, not thinking, is what provides clarity in life, in your career, in relationships. Action, not thinking, provides clarity.
I hope that person notices that your book is a bestseller. Just saying.
Thank you.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
So what does it mean to be brutal in a way that's empowering rather than destructive?
Yeah. Well, brutal is about ruthless prioritization. This is some of the best advice a senior leader ever gave me at Google. And, he was going through a reorg. He was moving his family to Chicago. He had, 2 young kids. And I said, how do you do it all, Mike? And he said, it's easy, Jenny. Ruthless prioritization. I say yes to the big and no to the small. And I redefine brutal as the courage to protect your time, energy, and priorities, because people pleasing pleases no one and keeps you small. Brutality is cleaner, more effective, and far kinder. So cut through the bull, spare everyone's time, effort, and energy, and say what you mean. Clear is kind, as Brene Brown says. So this is really about, how do you tactfully say no to the meetings you don't want to go to? How do you graciously decline a favor that someone asks of you? How do you not say yes every time someone says, can you hop on a quick call? Because every one of those yeses leads to 20 other yeses down the line, little mini yeses. And that's Dory Clark's work from The Long Game.
Yes, for sure. So reckless sounds risky. How do you encourage people to take bold action without being careless?
Well, there's again, that you can
There's a line.
There's a line. But, I think there's so much more latitude for where we can be more reckless. Reckless is the courage to err on the side of action and take healthy risks. Better to learn from your mistakes than waste time analyzing every potential outcome of a decision. Think fast and fearless, and if you're on the fence, do it. And I really struggle with this one. This one is the hardest for me. Some come naturally to me. Obsessed comes naturally to me. Bossy comes naturally to me. Weird comes naturally to me. Reckless does not come naturally to me. Leaving Google to, be what I call a starving artist, right? Like to be an author and a writer.
Right.
That was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. I spent 18 months going back and forth and back and forth. I should stay, I should go, pro, con lists. And man, I should have just left 18 months earlier because I wasn't being reckless enough. And so, you talk to your financial advisor, you talk to your partner, you talk to the people who can help, the people on your board of advisors, but then stop second guessing yourself. Stop going back and forth in your head. It's a huge energy waster. Think fast and fearless and do it. And it doesn't come naturally to me. But I have found that I've been more successful in my life when I've been open to failure and recognize that failure is just data. And that if you look at any leader that you admire, their resumes are riddled with course corrections or tweaks or adjustments or zigzag, windy paths. But don't ignore the discography of their career and only focus on their hit albums, whoever that leader is that you admire.
Right.
And so those are the little mini failures, the little moments of recklessness that allowed them to learn and grow the most.
Let's consider this last of these terms that you're using. One is it's bossy. Bossy is often used to shut people down. How do you help people own that trait with pride?
Well, first of all, my kids once got me a pair of socks novelty socks that say, I'm not bossy, I'm the boss. And it's true. I led a team at Google. And, I think of my non-bossy moments where I was not serving my team as well as I could. There was someone on our team, Troy, who was about to take paternity leave. And I remember sitting with my leadership team, senior leaders at Google, at a restaurant in Boulder for an offsite. And we spent 45 minutes, Roger, 45 minutes, as I tried to get everyone's opinion on the best way to do Troy's paternity leave coverage. We could do it 50-50. We could everybody do, 20%. We could have just one person do it. We could bring someone in totally new from another team. And they got to the end and someone was like, Jenny, you're the director. Direct. You decide. They were begging me to be bossy. And so I think keeping in mind that when you're in a leadership position, whether that's your official title or not, people respect it when you have an opinion. People respect it when you, let's say, give 3 options, have a POV. If you work at a button factory, go to your VP and say, we've got 3 options next year. We could double down on red buttons, blue buttons, yellow buttons, and I recommend yellow buttons for XYZ reason. You might be wrong. You might be right. It doesn't matter. Be bossy. Have a perspective because that is what makes you seen as a future leader.
For sure. Now, in your experience, how can people build and nurture their courage over time, especially when they're faced with occasional setbacks?
Well, that's a good example of the setback I had when I was launching this book, and someone didn't just say no to me, but they said no and we're done with this relationship. You learn from that. You think about how do you tweak your messaging? Or here's another example. I sent 100 emails to companies asking, do you want to buy a bulk copy of this book? Thinking, oh my gosh, by the end of the day, I'm going to have so many checks in my mailbox that the mailman is going to have to come knock my door and deliver the rest of the checks in person. That's how many people are going to say yes to me. Didn't exactly work out that way. So you use it as data, you course correct. And so, when I didn't get a ton of people responding to the request for 300, orders of the book for their company, I said, how about 50? To the next group of 200 that I had to send out, I scaled it down to 50. I shortened my pitch by a lot. I share with people, pull it and bullet, pull 50% of the text from your email, pull it out, cut it, and write in bullets instead. So I used my own kind of tactics and tools. It's a great way to also be manipulative and get people to say yes to you. So you use the failures to course correct. But man, I've had a bunch of doozies in my life, and I would just have to, use them as spine straightening opportunities and say, okay, another learning opportunity.
Sure. You listen, you learn, and you move on.
Right. Or as my dad says, some people live and learn and other people just live.
Good for him. Now, you talk about kicking imposter syndrome to the curb. What's your go-to strategy when it creeps in?
I did this with another executive client just recently where this person was, their company was going through layoffs. So it was they were at risk of being on the chopping block, and they'd gotten some tough performance review feedback, and they were just really struggling to push past the imposter syndrome and to get that mojo back, to get the confidence back. And so I had them write down a list of 20 things. We literally went on mute. I used it as an opportunity to get some more water, and we went on mute, and I said, write down 20 things that you are really proud of this week. They could be big, they could be small, they could be things that nobody knows about, things that a lot of people know about. And they wrote down, I led my team through this reorg effectively. I presented in front of the board and I did a great job. I said fewer times than I did last quarter when I presented in front of the board. We have a negativity bias in our brain. It is just the way our brains are wired, again, to keep us safe, as if we were on the savannah and we had to anticipate every possible negative outcome that could happen to truly keep ourselves physically safe. But the brain does not differentiate between actual threat and perceived threat. So this person was feeling perceived threat, like, what if I get laid off? What if I lose my job? How will I support my family? So you have to work even harder to counter that natural negativity bias. And writing this list of 20 things you're proud of from this week, you could do it right now. You could get off the call, you could stop listening, and you could write down 20 things you're proud of this week. It's an incredible antidote to imposter syndrome.
Now, you mentioned the concept of radical self-acceptance. How can people start to practice this in their own lives, especially if they've spent years being self-critical?
Yeah, that's another form of negativity bias, right? Like if your boss tells you in your performance review, you're good at apples, bananas, and pears, but I really need you to work on strawberries. What do? That day you go home to your partner and say, I'm terrible at apples, I'm terrible at strawberries. Not remembering that like apples, bananas, and pears are strengths of yours. So we believe the voices in our head. We believe the things we tell ourselves. And there's always an option to separate truths and tales. This falls under shameless. What are the truths of a situation and what are the tales? Man, when I was leaving Google or debating leaving Google, I got real muddled in what my truths were and what my tales were. And it was a lot of self-sabotage. Truth is a verifiable fact. This microphone is black. This balloon that my son put on my desk is blue. We are recording a podcast. What is a tale? It's the story that you create that helps you make sense of the facts. So when I was leaving Google, I told myself a whole bunch of tales. I'm going to have to move out of our nice house in Boulder as the breadwinner for my family. I'm going to lose my identity not being a Google exec. My parents are going to be mad at me and disappointed because, they think I'm throwing away the next 15 years of revenue potential in my highest earning years. Well, those were tales. What were the truths? I wasn't going to get a paycheck with the Google logo on it every 2 weeks. What were the truths? There were other ways that I could identify, right, as an author and now a successful author, a best-selling author. Didn't know it at the time, but that's what the truth ended up being. And as I separated the truths and tales and rewrote the tales to be, even if they weren't more empowering, at least more neutral, I was able to, again, push past the fear of what not being at Google might look like.
How can someone start showing up more boldly at work without waiting for permission? What does that look like?
Yeah, sometimes it's even in the language we use in our emails. It's bold to look at your emails and count how many sentences start with the word I versus how many sentences start with the word you. I call this woo with you. Let's say you're pitching a customer and you're training them on products and you're upselling them, and your draft looks like, I had so much fun training your company on this product. I would love to come back and train you on our additional products. I think that you'd benefit from it. Well, you could swap that and woo with you. It's a bold move to assume what the benefit is to them. You were an incredible team to partner with today. You are doing great things for your customers in the way you help them achieve XYZ thing in the healthcare industry or whatever it is. And that takes some risk. That's some risk taking. It's bold. It's like it's assuming how you think they're adding value to their customers. You might benefit from this new leadership training I'm doing or product training I'm doing because of XYZ reason. So even a small thing like that is helpful to reframe your language to have more you sentences than I sentences. And that's not that risky. It's just a quick awareness of what your emails look like when you're trying to influence.
Here's something I found, another of many things I found interesting. On the advice of your very wise grandmother, your husband refused to be let go when his employer announced a round of layoffs. What courage principle did that represent, and how did it work out?
Well, nosy and shameless, and it worked out great. So Grandma Lila was not only shameless, she was unstoppable. At 4'10" and 90 pounds, she was a spitfire. Not only did she agree to be a bridesmaid in my wedding at the age of 88, but she was the CEO of her own financial services company until the age of 92. And when we were living with her, John and I, when we first got married, because we were apartment hunting in New York, we sat down to dinner and John shared that unfortunate news that you just led with. He had been part of a major company restructure and he'd been laid off. And Grandma, I'm like totally crushed as a newlywed, but I look across the table and Grandma has that gleam in her eye and she shares one of her shameless lines, which is, "No is just an opening offer, John. Don't sign the paperwork." And John's like, "What do you mean don't sign the paperwork?" A layoff is like a one-sided thing. They say, "You don't work here anymore." And I say, "Okay." And that's when Grandma Lila sighs. And she said, "Well, sure, it would be more comfortable to take no for an answer, but that discomfort will pass. Get your ego out of the way, get nosy." I don't know if she actually said get nosy. That's how I interpret it. Get your ego out of the way and find a compromise. You both want something. They want to get work done, even though they can't afford to pay you. And you want a job because it's easier to have a job, to get a job when you have a job. And so finally, John relents and does embrace the nosiness and selfishness, shamelessness, goes to his VP the next day and half-heartedly offers to stay on for 10% time and pay while he job hunts. Surprisingly, they say yes. And then when the financial crisis passes, they move him up to 50% and then move him back up to full-time 100%. And now I'm not sharing this as some influence tactic per se. The point is Grandma Lila's lesson. Don't let shame shape your decisions. Don't let fear shape your decisions. But how often do we do that? How often do you not ask a partner for what you need or a boss for what you want? Or in my case, the cute person on the subway, if you can give them your business card. Chances are when we don't take action, it's because of fear. Fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of judgment by others, fear that you might be called shameless or bossy or manipulative or reckless. But when fear is at the root, fear can also be the solution because you can push past that fear. And when you do, no matter you succeed or fail in any one given thing, you realize the joy and the wonderment and the fulfillment that lies on the other side, because that's where the real magic lies. And everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So when you push past it, real learning and growth and happiness are right there waiting for you.
Your grandma is very wise, and I think it's in the gene pool, Jenny.
Thank you.
One more question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's about to take a courageous leap in life, what would it be?
Well, I'm going to steal it from Nike. Just do it.
Just do it. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. This conversation's been every bit as thought-provoking as I expected it to be. I really appreciate your joining us on Leadership. To learn more about Jenny and her work, go to itsjennywood.com. That's jennywood.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. My guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Amy Edmondson, Bill George, Dory Clark, Jessica Chin, Guy Kawasaki, Dana Perino, David Ulrich, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. You can also listen to past episodes. Trust me, folks, you don't want to miss any of our guests. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.